Welcome to the Talking Transport Show. I'm your host, Jacqueline Brotherton. With me today is Senator Glenn Sterle from Western Australia. Glenn is a senator for the Australian Labor Party. He's the chair of the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport Legislation Committee and the deputy chair for the Rural and Regional Affairs and Transport References Committee. Glenn was elected in 2004 and re-elected in 2010, 2016 and 2022. He has served on many committees and held many party positions and served on a huge amount of committees and given his service. Glenn has huge qualifications in the transport industry as a truck driver and owner-operator, and started out in the really hard industry as a furniture removalist. I'd hate to have that, and received the Centenary Medal in 2001. Now, this morning, welcome, Glenn. This morning, we've got a few questions to ask and a few things to discuss. Also, I didn't mention that he's a duty Labor senator for the federal election of Durack and O'Connor. So, firstly, there's a few hot potatoes, as always, in the transport industry. Some are hotter than others, and we always pay a juggling thing in the trucking industry. And as we were just talking about off camera, was that it's a very hands-on industry, very down to earth, and it's always great to talk to other trucking people and mode transport people because we all are on the same page and speak the same language. So we're very happy to have you with us here today, Glenn.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be with you, and it's great to be on Talking Transport this morning. And yes, we speak our own lingo, but the best part is we understand each other, and we all have the same values. We all want to leave home, do what we need to do, and get home safely.
That's exactly right, and to do that, we sometimes have an uphill battle. I was speaking yesterday about how long some of our fights last before we actually get over the line with them, and and people outside the industry don't realise how long some of those campaigns take before you. And some of them seem a no-brainer, especially when they something to do with safety or making the industry better. And you think, to people inside the industry, you think that this is so simple, but to people outside of it, they go, well, why do you want to change that? Why is that? Why? They just don't understand something that's so ingrained in us. But to me, it's all about getting not only our drivers, which are the backbone of everything we do, but not only getting them home safely, but also our operations people who work sometimes very long hours, but the other road users. And a lot of that training has to go into training them. And we've had a lot of great campaigns about that, but they need to be ongoing, not just every time we can get a little bit of funding to do it, or some association finally has enough money to do that. So I had a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about. I know you have one that you really want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about that first because we might never get off the subject. So one of the things, and I've been off a few months now through choice from my last contract. I wanted to talk about the licensing. I think they're changing some of the licensing setup because obviously you can get your heavy rigid and then maybe not drive again really before you get your HC. What do you see, firstly, and we don't have to dwell on it, how we could change that so it's the same overall for the licensing? And there's been a lot of talk about how we deal with our migrant drivers, and I think they, except for New Zealand, which obviously we have a different agreement with them because they're almost part of Australia. And but I think all migrant drivers otherwise should be created equal. They should have to go through the same rigorous tests. I don't think they should get anything because we have a lot of white Australian drivers who can't drive very well either. So I think we all have to have that pathway made more rigorous and be created equal. That once we get into a heavier vehicle, that we actually know how to drive it.
Well, I'll start with the easy part first and talk about our licensing around the nation, because like you, unfortunately, we have all these things going on around Australia where you and I and the rest of the trucking industry, we just see dotted lines on a map, which is nonsense. I mean, whether we're driving in rural New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria, Queensland, Tassie or WA or the Territory, a road is a road, and we're challenging all the same things. Life's not the same whole there. Let's go back to where we should be going. Unfortunately, I know I was part of the committee that was working on this back in the late 90s in my previous life about trying to get, consistency around the nation. Now, what we wanted to do, and I still stand by this, we don't want to make it easier to get a license, but we want to make it common sense. And
Yeah.
currently now the system we got now is not common sense. When, just because you get your medium rigid, your heavy rigid, then you got to wait a year or two, then you get your semi license, for want of a better word. And I'm using the old terminology here, till we move on to MC and HC and that sort of stuff. Just because there's a 2 year gap doesn't mean that the driver's going to have 2 years of experience. This is the stupidity. So we need it skills based. And I will say this, Jacqueline, like your good self, we're now past our 5th decade in this industry and we're still fighting the same good fights. There's not many people out there, and I say this with my hands on my heart, the Jacqueline Brothertons or the Glenn Sterles that sat there in their early formative years before we left school thinking, I want to be in the transport industry, and I'll speak for myself because that's where my family were, in the transport industry. And I know I used to stare out the school class the window thinking, how the heck can I get out of here? Well, what we've effectively done, Jacqueline, is we've killed the nursery. Without any serious goggles, for the future, by having all the safety and train, we have to have all that. We can't argue against it. But no one thought back then, when we were nodding our heads to bureaucracy and regulators about being safe and doing all the stuff that we want to do, where are we going to bring our young people into the industry? The days of people like me learning at my old man's hip, on sitting on the hump on the BMC, I think it was. It could have been a comma, I can't remember. And my brother and I playing with the steering wheel while Dad was in unloading at the back and jumping up and down in the back of the truck. They're gone. And we
Absolutely.
have so many, and please jump in because this starts me on a tangent. We'll be here till 5 o'clock tonight. Anyway, I will stop going, but we can't take our kids and our grandkids to do what we did. We can't have them running around the yard and practicing on the forklift when they're 13, 14. Because God help us, we'd be, oh my goodness, don't need to go down there. No, let's get back to what your question was. We need to actually come to a situation where if we have young men and women who show the hunger, the passion and the desire and the skilled knowledge to want to learn and suck it up like a sponge, why do we have to wait till they're 21 or 22 to put them in a prime mover? I mean, I started road training when I was 20, when we had the good old days of the C class. And Jacqueline, I'll expose myself here for everyone to attack me. The first time I did a road train, I couldn't back the dolly. No one said to me, this is how you've got to do it. And let me tell you, what should have taken half an hour to do it a lot was about a 3-hour venture. And I think I lost about 3 kilo at the old Apple Street yard in WA. So I'm all for the training and all that, but we're going to get some common sense. And I will cap it off with this. We've got everyone around the nation, all the state associations and the unions, all piecemeal, all doing their extraordinarily best to attract young ones into the industry. But until we get the licensing right, whereas if an 18 or a 19-year-old shows the skills, well, put them in that darn truck. Long as the training is all above board, long as they've got buddies and everything, and our industry will burst at the seams to do that, to get the kids. And I'll leave it on this one, Jacqueline, and I will wind up. In 2026, and I've been bashing my head on this one since I was a TWU organiser in the 90s. In what world is it still right that we can put an 18 or 17-year-old into an aeroplane and go off flying into the wild blue yonder, but we can't put them in a forklift? Anyway, I've had me rant. Your turn. And then we'll talk about foreign drivers after that.
That's the other thing, but also the other thing that comes with that, like a lot of people, they don't want to show the younger drivers like that. I had a young guy that was working with me, and I live in an Indian community, and I work a lot with Indian drivers, and I have nothing but admiration for the boys I've been working with. But one of them rang me and said, Steve, the guy's name was Steve, just showed me how to some things, and it made my job so much easier. He said he was so good to me, and I rang the driver and I said to him, thanks so much for helping him. I said it just made it so much easier, and he said to me, some old bloke taught me one day, and now it's my turn. And if everybody had that attitude, we would have a lot more experienced young men. Even if you're just unloading beside them or something, if you see them that they're not able to manage on their own, or they're doing it wrong, or there's an easier way to do it, like say, like, mate, if you look like this, and give them a hand rather than poking fun at them or videoing them, whether they're migrant drivers or young Australian drivers, it doesn't matter. If you give them a helping hand, everybody's going to be much better off, because they're not going to be holding up the dock or the ramp or whatever it is to do that. So I'm pretty passionate about, like, none of us came out of the womb knowing what to do, but if you're passionate about it, which obviously I am, about trucking in general, and like you I wasn't looking out a school window wanting to go drive the truck, but every time someone went past the school and blew the air horn, the whole class laughed because they knew that what was happening. So on the 8th of August this year, it's 56 years since my family took over the business that brought me into trucking, so a long, long time ago. And I'm usually, once I was the youngest person in the room, now I'm often the oldest. I don't like that much, but that's what happens. If you stay long enough. Yes, I did notice this morning when I looked up your page, you're younger than me. I don't like that. But that that happened. And the other thing I think that goes along with the licensing is our driver training organisations have to be responsible for their contribution to this as well. They have to be, and I don't know, I'm not bagging any of them, but they have to be more regimented as well, so they're all the same, on the same page as how they go about training them. So I think that's really important. They're part of that training and learning and licensing and getting them on the road. But if you've got that passion, you don't keep that passion if you can't get in to do what you want to do. Like, you can't wait around. Like, I was 13, if I had to wait 7 years or 8 years to enter it, I would have, gone and done something else, would have been a school teacher or an accountant or something that, what your other passions are, your next thing, teaching or, numbers or something like that. You don't, then you don't come back until you're 50. And, and that's how it goes. So, and there's no doubting, I think, the passion of a lot of people in this industry, but getting the change made is very, very difficult. So what was your next thing? Oh, the migrant boys.
Yeah. Yeah, the foreign drivers, we need to address that. And I just will say one thing very quickly, Jacqueline, that the majority of and I say our truckies, and our forkies, and everyone, they're walking filing cabinets.
Absolutely.
And there is no greater source to learn what you're doing wrong and how to correct it and do it safely than someone who's lived it all their life. And as you said, we all learnt, and I can tell you, in the furniture removal industry, and that was a tough industry. Let me say that very, very clearly, as transport is. And they weren't backward and forward, the men with the boys, because we the offsiders, we were 15, 16, 17. We got a kick in the backside. I can tell you a couple of times, mate. Or anyway,
Yeah.
Can't do that anymore. Now let's talk about the issue with foreign drivers, and I just want to clarify a few things. And I've been working with a lot of Indian drivers, and I do a lot of work with Amar Singh, Turbans for Australia.
Yep.
I've done a Punjabi podcast, and I will say the social media stuff, and I see the photos and I see the put ding ding going on. I think it is absolutely disgusting. It's disgraceful. If you think it's clever to video a misdemeanor from a foreign driver or an Indian driver and think you're making a fantastic contribution to our industry, well, brother or sister, you and I are on opposite pages, and you're the sort of people that give our industry a worse name. Very happy to have that conversation. So let's go back to it. Jacqueline, we know through the NatRoad's work that the figure was about 23,000 we are short in the transport industry, truckies, forkies, admin, sales staff, and loaders, the whole lot. And we need drivers. And we have a interesting transport supply chain issue going on. What we're told, every 15 years, or every 15 to 20, our transport task doubles. And guess what? They're right. It does. But our intake isn't. So what we should be doing is we should be putting our arm around our foreign drivers. But on saying that too, there is a massive flaw in the licensing to bring in anyone, and you touched on the Kiwis, and yes, I love that part. They're always the part of Australia. I get that bit. But our Indian drivers, and there are many, many good ones out there, they don't drive double, triple road trains and quads and the gear that we drive over here. There is no argument that can be put up with me by any bureaucrat or any member of parliament that says that we should have mutual recognition and let them come in and do 8 hours and then jump into a double or a road train. And is to use the words of my very dear friend Amar Singh, where he is pleading with me to continue doing what I'm doing, because we should not be putting these people into these vehicles without the proper training, because they don't drive them back in India. Very clear.
And I don't disagree with that, but I also think that if other than the Kiwis, as I said, because I got shut down, I don't have a problem with treat. As I said, they're like an eastern state of Australia, but and I have some Kiwi neighbours, and we don't get involved in that discussion. Most of my neighbours are from India or some from Pakistan. But there are some very good Indian drivers out there, but I have been to India. I went to one of my drivers' weddings over there last year. And yes, the trucks are different sizes and different things. But once they show that they have the skills necessary to drive whatever we need to drive, we then need to treat them with respect. And each part of our industry have different things. I've taken a lot of young and a bit older drivers into the livestock industry, and they need to that's where they've needed a bit of a hand with. They've never worked with the sheepdogs before, and people have been very welcoming to them. And the drivers in the company that I was working with, the older Australian drivers there were fantastic in welcoming them and showing them, and I have nothing but admiration for them. But some of the other companies weren't so welcoming. But I said, this is how you're getting the work done. So, if you're prepared to teach them, they're prepared to work. So you have to be you can't get drivers anywhere else. So, if they're prepared to learn, they're prepared to work, they're prepared to put in the hard yards. And I'm not saying they did, and none of them have done that like the minute they arrive in Australia either. They've been here quite a long time, but you have to embrace the ones that are doing the right thing. And I think that's where you can't. Not all Australians are, you good, me bad. It's just how it all goes. And there's plenty of everybody that makes mistakes. Like I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. You make mistakes. You're not perfect, and
Still
so
making
does
them.
everybody else. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say we're old, but I want to say that. But no, for sure. So that was just I wanted to see where you stood on those things and on the training. And as I said, there's very many reputable training places out there, but there's also some that they have a bit of theory, and then they have 5 hours in the cab, and then they're in the truck. And that, to me, I don't care whether that's my Australian brother-in-law or whether it's someone who landed back on Sunday from Canada or from Britain or wherever. They should not be given their license.
I wholeheartedly agree. And let's go to this, and just if I can too, Jacqueline, and I'd said this on Punjabi radio too, but I want to talk about Australian values.
Yeah.
So, and around and welcoming our brothers and sisters from wherever they come around the world to contribute to this great nation. And as I said to my host on the Punjabi radio, my family came here from war-torn Europe.
Yep.
And they were welcomed with open arms, and they did everything they can to marry, build a home, raise a family, and contribute to Australian society. And we want foreign drivers to do the same. And if they can come into our nation and get their skills up, do the test all properly so they are safe on the highway as well, why would we not embrace that? So yes, we've got a long way to go as a nation, but unfortunately, the minority give us the bad name. But we cannot continue to just keep issuing licenses as it is. They have to be brought up to a standard, and get behind the wheel, get out there, and I can tell you now they'll make a fantastic contribution to our nation and our industry.
And the third topic, you shall tell me when I'm out of my first 25 minutes. See, we took so long to get started. My third thing, and which has come up because of the trouble in the Middle East, which I've also visited when it was much quieter over there, and loved it, loved the people, loved the Middle East, is our fuel security. Now, that was a big hot topic when the trouble started. And what are your thoughts on that? I know there's been a lot of lobbying going on for probably the last 20 years on keeping a lot more fuel on shore. And obviously that comes at a cost, but also comes at a huge cost when we don't do it. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Jacqueline, yes, thank you very much, because I was doing a lot of lobbying as soon as America started the action in the Middle East and knowing what was coming. But I want to take a little trip down memory lane, and I can't remember the years. I think it was about 2009 or 10, and then again in 2011 or 12, that I chaired an inquiry into Australia's future oil supplies. And back then, and it's important I can share this with your listeners and your viewers, We have an agreement, we have a treaty with the Energy Agency that was supposed to have 90, I think it's 90 days of fuel security. Back then we had, I think it was about, excuse me, 5 refineries. And when I asked the department in the public hearing, this is the Department of Industry, I think it was at the time, who were doing the fuel security stuff. I said, how are we looking? How many days have we got? How many days of fuel on our shores? And they said something, and it's all in the hand, so they can be tracked back. But with my memory, I will just have a rough guess. And they said something like about, 45 days. And I said, have another go. And they had a whisper amongst themselves. And then they came back and said, well, it'll be over 30. I said, stop there, stop, before you start digging any further. I said, the truth of the matter is you have no idea, correct? They didn't answer yes or no on the answer. I said, but I'll make it easier for you because my research showed me of those days that the government was espousing at the time included, ready for this one, Jacqueline, included ships on their way to Australia. Good tick, no worries. But what they didn't own up to, but I'd found out also, was it also included forward orders that had not left Japan, Singapore, Korea, or wherever they're coming from. Because I know that, because the Kimberley ran out of diesel there about about 6 months before the Senate inquiry. So to answer your question, we can never have enough fuel on our shores here. Never, ever, ever. And I know now, and this is not doing the political line, we got a lot more than what we had before, going back 3, 4, 5 years. But what we haven't got, Jacqueline, is 5 refineries or 6 refineries. They were shut down. Goodbye, waved off our shores. And you and I both know with our trucking and business backgrounds, you just can't start a refinery on a whim and a prayer and a wish. So this is always going to be a prickly issue. There is no doubt about that. But to answer to leave your question as it is, never, never, ever can we have enough on our shores. Because I have said this, and I've said it on the public record, that my firm belief, and I'm talking with no experience at all, Jacqueline, but I'd safely say that if I wanted to invade Australia, I wouldn't have to put one gun, one pair of boots, or one bullet on our shores. You just stop our fuel at the Straits of Malacca.
Yep.
That's my view anyway. I'd probably get a lot of people argue with me on that, but
Oh, look, a lot of things we're going to say are probably going to get a lot of arguments because they don't understand the bottom line of what you're talking about, or they don't want to understand the bottom line. I think there's still a lot of people, and I don't care where you are, they don't have a clue how they get what they have. If that's the easiest way to say it, they don't understand where they go to the supermarket, they get their food, they buy it every day or they buy it every week. They don't understand what it takes to get it there. You know, a woman said to my mother once that she didn't care if it never rained again. She didn't, it wouldn't affect her.
I
And
hear all that stupidity every day around here. Let me tell
and
you.
like we come from the outback, and I thought my mother would actually explode. She said, "Well, I didn't know you were such an idiot." And the woman didn't take.
We should put your mother in Parliament.
Yeah, no, my mum's passed away in the meantime, but she didn't mind calling a spade a spade. She would have been a great politician. Except she was too blunt, probably. They didn't have the opportunities for that back when my mum was born, unfortunately. Otherwise, we probably would have been in a much better place. But that's the mentality of a lot of people. They don't understand that, what actually happens to bring them everything that they need, and that a lot of it comes from needing that fuel from offshore and needing that. The other thing, of course, is now with the digital age, that they don't have to do much to stop us from doing anything with the digital era. And you see all the hacking and everything that goes on and stops our flights, and airports are backed up, and all of that, which is a very difficult time for us. But I think that people have to sooner or later, and one of those things will be running out of fuel, I guess, is dealing with the reality of if they don't have that communication, they don't have that mobility, we have to that they have to, something's going to happen to them. And I think, unfortunately, during COVID, they started to appreciate the transport industry for a while, but as soon as things got back to normal, or as normal as ever going to be, they forgot everybody again. It was just like, okay, we don't need you anymore. Like, you can, whistle Dixie for us. So
Have you been reading my transcripts, Jacqueline?
I should be, probably. I should get you to send them to me. But so I lived through that as a cold storage worker, transport company worker, and it seems so surreal to have a permit to go to work and a curfew to get out of the office and go home at night time. And you just sort of thought, I never thought I'd be living in this country or in this state, and where we had to go through checkpoints to get out of the city if you lived, just outside the city limits and all those sorts of things. And you thought, where am I actually living? But to see our truck drivers finally, in one way, treated so much better, but in other ways, when they weren't allowed to use the facilities and all of that was just, and as I said, they were thanking everybody and everything, and then we're opened up and they're like, yeah, yeah, don't worry about me anymore. So yeah,
It
so I
was
think
scary times. It was
it
very
was
scary.
absolutely scary times, and may they never come again. Unfortunately, so with some of the things that are happening around the world, you don't know that they will ever come again. But that's they were the three things that I really wanted to talk to you about today, and where we stood on them. I know they're national things, of course. You have different issues with the remoteness and the infrastructure and everything else in Western Australia that we don't necessarily deal with on the East Coast. I've driven across the Nullarbor, one of the best trips of my life in a truck, which was really great many years
Good.
ago now, which is really good. And I think some people never leave their own city, and I think that's a shame because there's got such a wonderful country out there. But also to do it in a truck gives you a little bit of an idea of how remote and how they rely on that industry to actually bring them their necessities of life, to see it out there, some of those places. And it was really, 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 really good to see that, especially I come from the back of Burke, so, relied on that all your life anyway. Glenn, just before we get on to that, one question I had for you on the fuel security, and I forgot, was the hydrogen and electric trucks. Obviously, at the moment, they're fairly, well, I think they're limited, the electric ones, to metro
Yep.
regions. I think they've done one quick run somewhere else. But how far away do you think they are in real terms as an alternative to, and I guess is good enough,
Sure.
because I have no idea.
Yeah, electric line haul. I don't think we're not going to be seeing them in the next year or two. I can safely say that. There is a role for them around town, but let's not forget it's early days. There's been a massive investment from the government. This is their niche. On the line haul, I know that Janice out of Newcastle's been doing a bit. I know Cube, Cube had one running out of a mine down in Port Augusta there somewhere. Not sure if that's going. They're not going to take over our highways in the next few years.
No, yeah, I think they've just taken over a bit of the headlines from the autonomous ones that were going to take over a few years ago.
Now, autonomous, that's going to really fire me up because I am absolutely opposed to that. We are first responders as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I won't get on my high horse.
No, we're not going there, because you'll have that discussion over dinner or something one day. Which are a pretty funny discussion. So yeah, so I'm with you. There is a place for them, and they will come, but not autonomous, electric
Yep.
or hydrogen. But it's not in the foreseeable future, and I'm pretty old, so I probably won't be around to report on it anyway. So the real hot potato at the moment, I'm not sure I really understand it, and I've been seeing a lot of headlines. As I said, I've been taking a bit of a step back the last couple of months. I haven't been that well, but it is the sham contracting. Now, I have my views on what I've read and what I understand and all of that about it, but I'm not sure I totally understand what they're talking about. So, and your thoughts on it?
Sure, Jacqueline. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's just put it nice and simple that it is not against the law for a driver to have an ABN and contract their expertise out to a transport entity or a transport company. And that would be like me going off to do a little bit of work for toll or work for another company or do a bit of livestock carting, where I walk in there and I bring my hands and legs, I drive your truck, and I tell you how much I want to get paid and when to go along that. For that, I will have my own workers' compensation. I will have my own taxational arrangements and insurances. Not against the law. But this is sham contracting. When an employer has their own trucks, their own equipment, their own clients, and they engage, not employ, engage drivers who all they bring to the table is their hands and legs and their lunchbox and a roadmap or something like that. And they are driving the company's vehicles, being told what time to start, what time to finish, where they're going, what they're getting paid, who they can't work for and who they can work for. That is called sham contracting. Is it a misclassification of an employee, but using an instrument that gives the employer the ability to to completely avoid insurances, all the employment stuff, the workers' compensation, holiday pay, sick leave, protective clothing, safety boots, superannuation. So in a nutshell, what that does, and it's rife in our industry at the moment, Jacqueline, where we have a lot of these drivers running up and down the highway with an ABN. A lot of them, which we've got the proof, we put them into the task force, are not paying, they're not getting superannuation in their rates. They're working for $35 to $40 an hour. You as an employer, Jacqueline, wouldn't it be lovely if you could pay your drivers a flat rate of $30 or $35 or $40 an hour without all the legislative other stuff that comes with it? So it brings where I'm coming from. I'm running the line hand in hand with the transport industry. If there is a new classification of worker where this behaviour becomes legal, tell all of us so we can all compete on a much fairer basis. Because these companies that are doing that at these rates, Jacqueline, they are winning contracts at 30% below costs for the transport operators that are doing the right thing by law. That's it in a nutshell. Happy to answer all questions.
Okay, so the driver is working for one singular company, and he's working one singular company, but as an employee, but not getting paid employee rates. Is that my understanding? But
that's it.
That's it. But another driver may be working for multiple companies. Is that what you're saying? And
Yes.
That's okay because he
can do that.
Yes. Okay.
That's not against the law. Yep.
No, okay. So that's where I was confused. I was thinking if they're working for multiple companies, that surely they can't have to have like multiple employment contracts with multiple different companies.
Oh, they do now. They can do now, Jacqueline.
They can they can.
They'll be a casual.
Yes.
Yeah. Or a part-time.
So I didn't think it was illegal for them to do it if they're multiplying out with multiple companies and paid all their own fees. But if they were working full time and bringing nothing except themselves, I fully understand now.
But can I add to that too, please, Jacqueline? That those operators who do, remember there are insurance, as you know, and I was an owner driver, and you know, as a business, you've got to have load insurance, you've got to have third-party insurance, you've got to have your own income protection for your like the workers' comp. And at $35 or $40 an hour as a line haul operator running B doubles or you have funny names in the United States, C triples or whatever they're called.
I just call B doubles and road trains and
it's B doubles, doubles or triples.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
And at 35 or 38 or 40 or $42 an hour, how the hell can they have load insurance? And this is a big problem too in their own personal insurance. And it's well known out there, but it is the shadow economy. So it's dark and no one wants to talk about it. And we have to get anecdotal evidence and then put them into the taxation department and Fair Work to investigate. They're not getting any. There are so many examples of them getting injured and no compensation. Nothing.
Well, that was my question.
I panic. Sorry, Jacqueline. I panic. What happens when the 3 trailers go over, or 2 trailers, or a B double goes over and it's full of mining gear or something like that? Who's paying the load insurance?
Yeah, anyway. My thoughts, like when I towed for a company back in the 90s, I think we had to have like almost, and that was with my own prime mover, like we had to have like 7 different types of insurance before we actually hooked up to their trailer. So, and I obviously had a driver in it because I don't have a license, but still, like he had his all like his workers, but we had to produce that workers comp for him as well before we were allowed to hook up there. But with our trailer in tow and our marine and public liability and all that, before we actually, before he got one pallet put on his truck, on my truck, on their trailer, you had to have all of these things to show that you were covered in every, and they were covered in every way, shape, or form. And I think, but so having said that, so so when, if you know or almost convinced that this is happening, then it should be reported. Like this,
Yes.
there's no point if you're just going to yell about it and jump up and down because they're taking your work or they've won a contract. If you only going to complain on social media or to one of our transport industry in magazines or ABC or whoever, if you don't actually act on it happening, because it will continue to happen. It's probably happened for years in different ways, shape, or form. But if you talk without action, nothing changes. So
That's right.
it's really, and it's not only companies that are just coming into the industry. I'm sure there are companies that have been around quite a while that are now doing it tougher, doing exactly the same thing.
Look, Jacqueline, you are absolutely spot on. It has been around for a while, but I will say it as it is. COVID put it on steroids. And
Yeah.
since then, it is just bursting too. There are some estimations. It depends who you talk to. These are industry leaders on the East Coast who are predicting is around about 40% of our drivers are on ABNs at the moment, or ACNs. And let me just say this, and I have documented proof that has been forwarded to the Shadow Economy Task Force of a A-lister company on the Australian Stock Exchange that has depots in the eastern states where they engage contractors on owner-driver agreements, but then the owner-driver will have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trucks. And they're exploiting visas as well. So that's all been handed over and there's some action going on now. I'll also say this, Jacqueline, that there are some of the big companies that are playing in this sphere as well. So they'll be out there and they'll be in this building espousing to me and anyone who wants to listen in the Friends of Road Transport about how wonderful they are and they do everything above board, yet they may have a manager or 2 or 3 or 7, 2 or 3 times removed, who is engaging in this behaviour. And it's unravelling. The only problem with this, it takes the wheels of government a long time to manoeuvre, but I can safely say we now have the ATO, we now have Border Force, where they've been out there on the road doing investigations and site visits. Fair Work Ombudsman doing a magnificent job. They've got 45 transport companies they've issued notices to for inspections, and the fourth agency being the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator. So they're doing a magnificent job. And what they're correlating is that the evidence they've gathered, 20 companies have lost their accreditation on the eastern seaboard just in one foul swoop on one roadside investigation. But they're also, the trend, and the NHVR have got this information and they've shared it with all us in the transport industry, is that there is an absolute correlation to a lack of maintenance or infringements on maintenance and fatigue that relate to sham contracting as well.
Okay.
So they're out there. The government has come out. The government agencies put out a joint statement there probably about 3 or 4 months ago where they are now clamping down on the road transport industry. And we, the industry, the leaders of the industry, are welcoming this with, there's a roar. Yes, please. You have the tools to do it. No one's ever done it. Now you're doing it because the industry stood together united, saying that, we have no problem with competition when it keeps us all going. But when it's done through breaking the law, then we have a real problem. And why should good companies lose work to these ratbags who are absolutely doing this?
Well, I think there's two things. If it comes down to maintenance and safety, even more so than breaking the law. If it comes down to maintenance and safety, breaking the law leads to maintenance and safety breaches. I think that's what's really important there. The other thing is do you have any ideas on that? I haven't followed it at all. I need to get my head around that, but I've been running around doing other things. We'll just briefly touch on that before we finish up for the day.
Yes, let me say this, and I had a great conversation with the minister, the federal minister, Catherine King, and I know that there was a desire And this can has been kicking down the road for about 7 years to reform the NHVL, and how many 600 odd pages of gobbledygook and all sorts of stuff. I will say this, that I share the frustration of the minister federally, and this is through now I'm going to be very political and try and be diplomatic here, Jacqueline.
Wow.
The states are an absolute pain in the backside. My frustration with the states is not hidden, where we can't have a grown-up, sensible conversation about transport and transport reform when the argument is not being controlled by state transport ministers. It is state police ministers. And I am an advocate for road safety because this has been my life and 3 generations of my life. But I am sick to death of this nation where we can't have a grown-up conversation that we know how to do this productively, we know how to do this safely, and yet we get harpooned, we get pushed to the back, coming from those who wouldn't know one end of a truck from another unless it hit them. Now, before I create too much controversy, the NHVL should have been, that review should have been a wonderful opportunity to cut red tape. And I backed my federal transport minister and her frustrations. And oh gosh, I wish we could take it out of the hands of the states, because we might get something done while there's transport people here. That's a big might. But I reckon we could do it. We can't with the state.
I think that's the whole thing. If you don't involve, and it doesn't matter what industry, if you don't involve transport people in the transport industry, if you don't involve, I don't know, shearers in the shearing industry, I don't really know what it is. You have to have the people with the grassroots knowledge and that, that knows exactly what they're talking about. And it's, as you said earlier, it's about talking the same language. When I first went into warehousing to work years ago, I came back to my boss and I said, I know why we can't work as a team. I said, because I ask a question, when I get an answer from the warehouse people, I know it's not the answer because it can't possibly be the answer. So I said, I have to go back and work out how to ask the question. Because, and at the end, before I left there, we're all on the same page, but you had to recalibrate how you spoke because it was just another language. And I think that's really where it comes from, is knowing the right words and changing your words and changing your language so everybody understands. And that's very, very hard to do. If you've got anything you want to finish up with, we're nearly out of time, and it's been fabulous having you here with us, and really, really grateful for how much time you've given me, Glenn.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I'd like to finish on a happy note. And
Okay.
like your good self, and thank you for saying I'm younger, because at times I don't feel it. But at 66, I can say safely, I can say with enthusiasm, that the last 3-4 years in this building, transport has been pushed up the ladder. No longer are we something that politicians think they will come and get a lovely photo in a high-vis vest standing next to a shiny Kenworth. We now actually are used in a lot of government terminology. You will hear in this building, you will hear government ads talking about fuel and mentioning truckies. And we've done that because of the maturity of the transport industry. This started probably about 8 years ago. And I know that I set out with a number of transport industry leaders to say that we agree on so many things. We agree on far more than what we disagree on. And to have the ability to talk to every transport industry leader in this nation and every organisation to say, one, let's park what we can't agree on, because governments and pollies and bureaucrats love it when we're fighting amongst ourselves. They find it extraordinarily hard when we all come in and we sing from the same hymn sheet, whether it's general, whether it's car carrying, whether it's livestock, whether it's fuel, mining, furniture, who cares? When we're all saying the same thing, it's very hard for them to say, well, something different. We've made massive inroads to highlight the importance of this magnificent industry, because it is so true. When the truck stops, the nation stops. We have been elevated right up the hallways. We're in the blue carpet here in Canberra. They know us. And I can't say too much. Watch this space. We're going to have another voice here in Canberra that highlights the importance of the road transport industry, and it will be transport people sitting around that table with me to elevate transport industries to the highest offices in this land. So on a positive, Jacqueline, you and I don't have many more years left in me to continue the fight from here. I'm safely saying that in 2 years' time, my term ends and I'll be 68 and I'm not going around again. And I'm looking for the next generation to come in. But we are on such a far better footing because of the maturity of our industry to come together and talk as one. It can only get better, onwards and upwards.
Absolutely. And it's been great having you. And it really has made a difference the last, as you say, 8 to 10 years, where everybody's been really working together. And I think that's makes you so proud of how far we've come in the last 20 or 30 years. I think that we're not all arguing amongst ourselves. I think that's been great. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch up with you again soon. Thank you, Senator. Take care.
Jacqueline, thank you for your work and all the very best to your listeners and viewers. And Jacqueline, you're a diamond. Thank you so much for having me.